As the war in Ukraine reaches a grim milestone of 2 years, Russia is claiming gains in the eastern part of the country. The fall of Avdiivka is the most significant gain for Moscow since it captured Bakhmut 9 months ago.
Ukrainian troops say they are holding back enemy forces, but dwindling ammunition and depleted ranks threaten their hold on the 1,000-kilometer front line. President Volodymyr Zelensky has appealed to his Western allies to speed up aid and plug what he called artificial weapons shortage.
Now, we are being joined this hour by Katerina Zelenko, Ukraine's ambassador to Singapore, and also in the studio is CNA's Im Yeon-suk, who traveled to Ukraine recently. Thank you very much both for coming in today. Ambassador, good to see you. The last time you were here, that was in August, and a lot has happened since then. Let's start with what is happening on the battlefield. We're hearing reports of the fall of Avdiivka and the continued advancement of Russian forces. What's your perspective and how the war is progressing so far?
Well, the situation on the battlefield remains tense. The retreat from Avdiivka was the tactical step needed to save lives. But we also have to be honest looking at those achievements made by the Ukrainian army over the time. We managed to liberate 74,000 square kilometers of land. And our army has pushed away the Russian naval forces massively over the past months. And we keep working to keep the situation under control. But of course, the situation in Avdiivka and the retreat of our forces is a clear testimony to the fact that the delay in assistance costs lives and costs dearly. On the other hand, the fight for Avdiivka lasted 10 years, since 2014, and it has cost the Russian army around 47,000 killed soldiers just to capture this small town, which means that there is sort of stagnation, so they could not advance significantly. But of course, we need more weapons, we need more assistance to make progress and turn the tide on the battlefield.
Ambassador, Ukraine's position, has always been, we might talk, or we will talk if you first return occupied territory. In the emerging chatter, and it's not very loud, but it's emerging that perhaps now, given the situation on the ground, perhaps it's now time to talk. Is that position still unchanged in terms of the occupied territories? Are you still holding on to the position that we'll only talk if you first return all these occupied lands?
Well, we have quite an experience with talks. We had since 2014, when the war actually started, around 200 rounds of talks with the Russian Federation. We agreed on around 20 ceasefires in the hope that it would stop Putin. It didn't. It ended up in an all-out invasion. Now we see that only with the use of force we can make a difference. That's why we urge our partners to send all the necessary equipment to keep us finish the job. The motivation is there. Our soldiers are committed to defending their country. They simply need the equipment to make it happen. Again, this is a modern war. This is a war of drones. This is a war of high technologies. This is a war of cyber solutions, which means we need to work together, and not a single country, let's be honest, in Europe is capable of defeating an aggressor alone. So we really need support from our partners, as ultimately it's not only about Ukraine.
Now, and Ambassador, you were just mentioning about the drones and the commitment of the soldiers, and I just came back from Ukraine, and it's amazing. It's not just your soldiers, but your people too, how brave they are. I mean, it's been 2 years already, and yet their resilience and the way they keep fighting, and they all say that they have to do something for Ukraine, even if they're fighting the Russians on the front line. So I got to meet all the Ukrainians, but I also, to get into Ukraine, I had to go to Poland. And I also met your Ukrainian refugees, who a lot of them had no choice because they had children, they were elderly. They fled to Poland. I got to meet them. And so let me share the story that I did in Poland first. Close to half of the Ukrainian children who fled to Poland attend local schools, like this one in Warsaw. Here they get to pick up the language, meet other children, and understand Polish culture.
На початку було дуже складно, бо я не знала взагалі польської, а потім, коли почала її вчити, там практикуватися, то легше стало. І коли почала спілкуватися з поляками, вчителями на польській, то дуже легко.
Out of about 850 students at the school, more than 100 are Ukrainians. New classrooms were built to take them in. Ukrainian teachers who escaped the war recruited to help them through the transition. Their presence has made the school more vibrant.
So they made a real big impact on the school. We wanted to integrate these kids both ways. I mean, Polish with Ukrainians, Ukrainians with Polish. So to share their points of view, to teach each other, to show their roots.
Children of Ukrainian refugees can go to school for free in Poland, though some opt for online classes to keep up with the Ukrainian curriculum instead. Since the invasion 2 years ago, more than 6 million refugees have fled abroad. About 1 million settled in Poland, which responded by providing support, including family benefits. Lyudmila Chimanchenko, or Luda, took her son Jan and crossed the border with just a suitcase in hand when the war broke.
С первого дня нам была дана единоразовая помощь сначала, когда вот мы только приехали, была помощь 300 злотых. Потом на детское нам давали это вот 500 злотых ежемесячно, а с 1 січня подняли 800 злотых на ребенка. Это очень большая допомога, это вот для детей, все, ну, как бы это очень хорошо.
While Luda misses her husband and elder son, who both stayed behind to fight in the army, she and Jan are making a new life for themselves in Warsaw. They have been living with their Polish host for nearly 2 years now. Luda helps out with household chores, and they are welcome to stay for as long as they need.
Я в Украине была это вот помощником воспитателя. Вот я бы хотела тоже как бы остаться на той профессии, только в Польше. Но для этого надо учить польский. Польская громада делает школы специальные для таких вот, как я в возрасте женщины, чтобы мы находили профессии и давали, ну, поднимали свою professionalism.
Surrounded by warmth here in Poland, the mother and son's desire to go back home is slowly ebbing.
Chcę zostać w Polsce, po prostu mi nie podoba. Ja nie chcę wracać w Ukrainę. Po prostu ja nie chcę zobaczyć, czy budynki, domy rozruszone, одиноkie. Ja chcę zobaczyć ojca, babci, brata i mojego kota zabrać do Warszawy w Polsce.
But Poland's resources are being stretched thin. Here at this refugee center in Warsaw City Center, the queues seeking help are long and donations increasingly scarce as the war drags on. Elderly Ukrainians who cannot find jobs find themselves in limbo.
If you have 65 plus years, you don't know language, you cannot work here. So how can you live in your normal life when you're like just sitting and waiting? What next? All those people hoping to come back, but a lot of them lost everything, like home.
Right, and if you saw that boy, he apparently for like 2 weeks was not able to talk after he moved. He went to Poland, and he has Asperger's, and so he syndrome, and so he has a bit of communication problems. But they're so happy in Poland. But you know, I got to meet a lot of the refugees, but I didn't get to meet some of the men who are in Ukraine, who are in Poland too. And I hear there are lots of them in Poland who left Ukraine in the first few months of the war. And I'm seeing a lot of reports that it's possible that they might be drafted or forced to come back to Ukraine to fight in this war. What's the situation now?
Well, I think even before the all-out invasion started, many Ukrainian men used to walk and travel to Poland, commute for work. I had some business reasons to go there. So at some point, they could have stayed there. Of course, now the situation demands that that our leadership takes decisions to get soldiers on the battlefield. This is natural, we are at war. But the new law on the conscription is still being considered by the parliament. We have not seen the text of it, but there is anyway no doubt that it will not violate the constitutional norms and of course the human rights in its provisions. And that's what we are expecting. But again, it is about streamlining the process in the fair way, which includes mobilization, training, rotation, and demobilization. That's why we really need to put this complex process on the right path. Speaking about people in Poland, this is really a moving story about refugees. I just wanted to make a short remark. You know, I know so many families of those who really are eager to go back home once the peace is restored. I think this is something which is special about Ukrainians. They are not really sticking to the places where they are, with all respect and gratitude to the countries that accommodated millions of Ukrainians when the war started. But I think this is sort of battle on different fronts. You have to fight against the aggression, and you also have to fight for your people so that one day they return and participate in the recovery of the whole state.
Ambassador, you earlier mentioned the issue of support and aid. Let's maybe talk about that. Back in August, you said you were positive about the bipartisan commitments, not only in the U.S., but around the world. But now the reality is that we're hearing reports of delays and stalemate in the U.S. Congress. Europe is grappling with their own limitations. How concerned are you? And the level of, I guess, worries among Ukrainian officials about the possibility of absence of further foreign aid, and what sort of measures are being put in place just in case they don't come through?
Indeed, all eyes are now on the process around the draft law in the United States and the decisions that are going to be made. I think the bottom line here is for the United States to finance the security needs of the United States first. My feeling is that there is a clear understanding that the support for Ukraine is also part of that needs. There is a bipartisan consensus on the fact that if we do not tackle the situation in Ukraine, it will be difficult to feel free and secure for every American too. And that is something that gives me hope that still the vote will happen and they will find tools to provide aid for Ukraine. And again, if you look at the numbers and if we compare to the previous wars, we see that the defeat in Russia in this war is affordable. It can be made with the right timeliness, with the right volumes, with technical alignment. It is all possible. Europe spent around $750 billion to tackle the pandemic. We need much less to tackle the war in Ukraine. But if we don't, the impact of it and the implications must be heavier.
And speaking of pressuring Russia, we know that U.S. is set to announce a new set of sanctions on due to the death of Navalny and also the ongoing war in Ukraine. Some experts are saying that the impact of sanctions are limited and that it's more effective to provide economic and military aid to Ukraine if we are to really hurt the Russians. I mean, do you believe in that? Or what are your thoughts on it? Is it a question of either or?
I think we should not miss the broader picture. One thing is to introduce sanctions. Another thing is to abide by these sanctions and to avoid any circumventing them. Because there must be a clear understanding that every electronic chip sold to Russia may end up in a missile that would tomorrow kill Ukrainian children. Every dollar earned on business as usual with Russia would be an investment in a protracted war, in disrupted supply chains, in inflation, in instability in so many regions of the world. And this understanding, I think, helps those who are quite skeptical towards sanctions to move ahead.
Ambassador, I want to ask you now about the death of the opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, as well. Is this a chance, does Ukraine see this as a chance to, I suppose, show who Vladimir Putin really is? I mean, you know, he's made some promises, you know, if he were to succeed in Ukraine, for example, Is it a chance to re-energize Ukrainians and a chance to show the world that, this is who he really is, this is what it could be? You really, please do come and help us here in Ukraine?
I think before the war in Ukraine started, many truly believed they knew what Putin thought. I think just now they realized what he's thinking of and how he demonstrates that he does not care about the rules, he does not care about human rights, he does not care about the international law. And this is, for me, one more testimony to the fact that for those who really want their children to live in safety in a rules-based society, they should look at it precisely and see what is the side of truth and what is the side of lies. The death of Navalny is one more testimony to the fact that we'll have to get united against the aggression, because this might be just a drop in the ocean if we don't. And then it might become not just an elephant in the room, but a monster that would absorb so many resources to tackle the global security crisis that it would then stretch so many to their limits.
And Ambassador, earlier you said you saw the story and you were talking about how many of the people in Poland wanted to go back to Ukraine. And it's true, it's amazing, because some of the people I speak to have said they've gone back over the weekend to see their families. And you wonder, how can you go back when there's still a war going on? But being in Ukraine, I understand, because it's a beautiful country and I would love to go back too. But once the war is over, and with everything that's going on with the U.S. Congress and the EU and the world, when do you think I will be able to go back? I mean, is Ukraine thinking, because I do talk to Ukrainian people and a lot of them say, yes, victory is what we want, but there are some people who feel that this is going on for too long. Is there any chance of a ceasefire negotiations so that I can go back soon?
I think if you ask people on the streets, and I'm sure you had a chance to talk to many in Ukraine, you might hear a bit less optimism that we heard last year, but there is no pessimism there either. The time for realism has come, that this might take us longer, and the duration of this war will very much depend on the timeliness and volumes of assistance we are getting. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet to fight against the aggression than with the use of force and all the necessary equipment. And I think for many Ukrainians, it's just the clear understanding that, okay, this time it will require us more energy to keep on keeping on what is seen as the form of resilience of Ukrainians. And that's how they think. But I truly believe in my people, and their resilience is just unbelievable.
Ambassador, I want to ask you about the possible return of Donald Trump. He's made, promises like ending the war in a day. And he oddly seems to be a fan of Vladimir Putin as well. I mean, is this something that you even think about? Do you have the luxury of looking 9 months into November and the inauguration only happens in January next year? I guess the question is, how do you handle this? Do you take care of the short-term ones first? Or do you look further ahead and worry about, who's going to be the next US leader as well?
I think that every decision that is being made requires thorough awareness. And I know that President Zelensky invited Donald Trump to visit Ukraine to see with his own eyes what is happening. In several months, people of the United States will make their choice, and people of Ukraine will respect it. And for Ukraine as a country that is now defending its independence, its territorial integrity, it is crucial to work with our major partners. I'm sure our leadership will be open to work with any administration to make sure that we can make a difference for the global security, not only for Ukraine and not only for Europe.
And Ambassador, you're saying that you just came back. Last year was the last time you went back home. What was it like going back home and seeing Ukraine the way it is now?
I think nothing can substitute seeing your relatives and your family. I was really happy to see my parents, although I was there for work. We had the ambassadors' conference in Ukraine, but I always try to take 1-2 days to visit my parents who live in the central parts of Ukraine. Just recently, my parents visited me in Singapore for the first time, and they were impressed by this country and its people. Going back home, it gives you strength. It gives you a clear understanding that you are blessed to live in safety, but you have to do everything possible to make them feel that safety again. Because Ukraine, in a peaceful time, is just a fascinating country. And many of those who were forced to leave the country because of the war just now realized how blessed they have been to be born in Ukraine, a country of talented people, the country of a fascinating nature, but above all, the country that now demonstrates such a level of resilience.
And closer to home, your second home, Ambassador, as the war drags on, how concerned are you of a possible war fatigue in this part of the world? I mean, there are so many other global issues and conflicts that are making headlines. Why is it important that people here in this region or the international community still pay attention to what is happening in Ukraine?
I think one should put a very simple question. What do I wish for my kids? Do I wish for them to be wealthy or military powerful? Do we want to live in the world where nations compete about who is richer and who has more social guarantees for its citizens, or who has built up more military capacities? If we choose the first, then the only way is to support Ukraine and to let Ukraine win this war. If we choose the second, it may end up in the geopolitical upheaval where the might is right. That is something that I do not think that in any part of the world would wish for themselves and their families.
And Ambassador, just want to quickly go back to, what it's been like for you for the past 2 years since the start of the war, the invasion. Has it changed a lot? I mean, has it become a bit of a struggle, as you try to reach out to people here in this part of the world with this very important message that you just outlined?
Alongside my colleagues, ambassadors of Ukraine and diplomats in different parts of the world, I also had, against my will, to become an expert in wartime diplomacy. And the bottom line here is to make impossible possible. Because when the whole world gave us 3 days, we have demonstrated to the entire community that Ukraine is capable of defending itself. When the whole world didn't believe in deliveries of the first wide-range equipment, it happened later because the need was there and it was clear that we cannot make a difference without. It's just working on that all time. And again, we see that the European Union is doing a lot. The new package of sanctions is on the way. No one believed that it would be possible to introduce so many of them. We keep going on. But for every diplomat, it's of course important to remain in contact with the capital back home. And for me, the way to do so is to put the alert app on my phone, and every time there is an air raid siren in Ukraine, I'm alerted. And that's a good reminder that, look, it's time for you to double down.
Do you get any rest at all?
I try to. I'm in a great country to do so. This is the best place to recharge your batteries.
Ambassador, thank you so much. We're out of time, but we appreciate the, this part of the morning that you set aside for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.